The question was, how long did the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus continue during the war, and were there any serious challenges to it? That's a very difficult, it's a wonderful question, but hard to give you a serious answer. Lincoln started to suspend in small geographic areas and then gradually expanded them to cover the entire United States over months. That continued, and as I said, that started in April 1861. Congress took the challenge of what do we do about this thing? And they wrestled and wrestled and wrestled. And finally, in March of 1863, almost 2 years later, Congress issued a habeas corpus law, a bill, that with amazing drafting, if you follow the legislative chain, it's quite amazing. And it said the president is authorized to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. It didn't say was authorized or is now authorized. It fudged it. So you never know whether they were ratifying what he did or said he had the power himself, so they fudged it. But what the legislation did do was very helpful. It put some conditions on and said, yeah, he can suspend it, but if he does, and we take people, they have to be, the names of the people have to be notified to the nearest court, and unless freed within X days, they're to be brought to a court and addressed. But this was also a time when you had a lot of draft resistors, and it was a contentious time. But there was never an effective challenge of the writ of habeas corpus suspension. Yes, sir.
Should legal counsel have advised the South, Jefferson Davis, against launching into the war, and indeed that perhaps they couldn't win that?
The question was, should legal counsel or political counsel or any kind of counsel have advised Jefferson Davis not to launch into the war because it wasn't going to be successful? Legal counsel might have said, it's probably not legal for you to secede. There was a Supreme Court decision after the war, several years after the war, Texas v. White, which involved a very complicated set of commercial bonds issued by the state of Texas. But in part of the decision, the Supreme Court said the secession of Texas was illegal. So that's the only scrap of law that would support it, and it's pretty weak. The Attorney General under President Buchanan, black, superb lawyer, opined to President Buchanan, which is when the secession started on his watch. The first secession act was on December 20th, 1860, South Carolina seceded. The Attorney General said to the President, you have no power to prevent this. You have no power to use force of arms. The Constitution gives you authority and requires that you safeguard federal property, and you can take all the defensive action you want. You can use force in defending federal property, like when John Brown raided Harper's Ferry. That was a federal arsenal, and Robert E. Lee went out there to defend it. You can do that, but you can't make an aggressive move against any seceding state. You don't have that power. When President Buchanan gave his equivalent of State of the Union in December 1860, he basically quoted from his Attorney General and said, you can't do this. Otherwise, the Constitution would be a rope of sand, the famous quote. It would be a rope of sand. You can't leave like this. So it's a question, A, whether it is constitutional to secede. In fact, in today's terms, the closest we've come is in Canada. 20 years ago, the province of Quebec, in effect, had a referendum and wanted to secede. And there was an opinion of the Supreme Court of Canada, an advisory opinion. Is this constitutional? What about the right of self-determination we always hear about? And they said, no, it's not legal under the Constitution of Canada. Last summer, the World Court, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, issued an opinion on the secession of Kosovo from Serbia, and basically said that didn't violate international law. Now, the other part of your question was, aside from the legality of secession, did somebody advise them, you're really dumb to start a war, fella, because you're going to lose? No, I don't think so, because I think they thought they were going to win for a number of reasons. They were preparing for a long time. In the fall of 1860, even before South Carolina left, you can read in New York newspapers, there's a delegation from Georgia, from South Carolina, up here to buy armaments. And all the New Yorkers were happy. Hey, here, buy these cannons, this is fine. So they were ready. The Secretary of the War of the Union, of the United States, just before, he started to move the US military around. We had these problems out in the West with Indians. So the American military was pretty weak. Virtually, we had a total armed force, US military, 15,000 men. Very small. Very importantly, the South said, cotton is king. And all the factories in England that are making all that cloth are dependent upon our cotton. And they'll side with us. And once they side with us, we'll win. What they didn't count on, unfortunately, was that year there happened to be a bumper crop the year before of cotton. So the Brits and the French and the other Europeans had stored lots of cotton, so they didn't really need immediate cotton supplies from the South. Secondly, the Brits had planted a lot of cotton in Egypt. It was finally coming on board from the Nile. And so the need here wasn't that, the need of Southern cotton wasn't so strong. So there was a lot of belief that we would win. The North doesn't have the fire in the belly to win. Who is going to come and fight us to preserve a union? And there were many people in the North who said, let the buggers go. We'd do a lot better without them. We're doing well, and we don't need these guys. So it was not a frivolous decision to go to war, and in effect they didn't go to war. They just said, this fort is now South Carolina's fort. And they had done that in Texas. They had done it, this was about the 9th or 11th US fort that southern states had taken over. In other cases, the US Army marched out. So we surrendered, goodbye. Lincoln was very clever in maneuvering the Fort Sumter thing so that the South fired the first shot. But the South didn't invade the North. The North invaded the South. Yes, sir?
I have a couple, two-part questions. One is, I think you made reference to this earlier. Is Guantanamo an American territory or part of the United States? And then, did they suspend habeas corpus in Guantanamo?
The question was, is Guantanamo part of the United States? And did they suspend habeas corpus in Guantanamo? I would love to avoid any current political discussion. I actually have been to Guantanamo Bay years ago. Beautiful place. Not the prison, but the bay is lovely. Guantanamo Bay facility is leased by the United States from the government of Cuba. We pay rent to Havana. It is not part of the territory of the United States. And there were efforts to employ habeas corpus. That leads you to the question, whom does habeas corpus protect? US citizens, residents of the United States, or somebody in Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan or in Guantanamo Bay? That's a discussion that's beyond what we could have now. But you see the relevance of habeas corpus and military commissions, both. Good question, but I'd like to stay away from the current politics of it. But the echoes of it are marvelous. Oh, we have two. Can we do two? Yes.
Well, I'm going to go back to the Civil War. You mentioned a fellow at the early part of the talk, Mr. Keyes.
Francis Scott Key?
Francis Scott Key. And he had a son, Philip Barton Key, who ended up being a lawyer, district attorney in Washington, D.C., who was killed by a lawyer, who was a congressman of New York, Dan Sickles, who had 8 lawyers to defend him. If you were one of those 8 lawyers on his team to defend him, who, of course, as you probably know, he got off by reason of temporary insanity, how would you have gone about that?
Oh, my heavens. I know the case. It's a wonderful case. And one of the best parts, I'm sorry, did everybody hear it? No? I'll try to do it. Francis Scott Key, Chief Justice Tawney's brother-in-law, had a son, his nephew, who was a lawyer and became the district attorney of Washington, D.C. He was having an affair, you didn't mention that, he was having an affair with the wife of a congressman from New York, Dan Sickles. He really did a job there. They had a little apartment, and he and Mrs. Sickles would meet. She was much younger than the congressman, very attractive, and they had this little apartment where they had their assignations. And somebody tipped off Congressman Sickles about it. And this is right across from the White House, literally on the park there. And Congressman Sickles was looking out his window one day when Key walked along, and they had a little signal arrangement with his girlfriend that he would wave, so he waved, not knowing that the wife wasn't there, but Sickles was. He started to walk around the park. Sickles grabbed a gun and went out and followed him all the way around the park, right in front of the White House, and said, shot him dead. Shot him, I think, 5 times or something. Now, open and shut case of murder, right? At that time, there was no sense of innocent by reason of insanity. To claim insanity, you had to be in an insane asylum. You had to be cuckoo, demonstrably. And this was a congressman. We know congressmen aren't cuckoo, right? And he had this, this is like the O.J. Simpson trial in the sense that this was the trial of the century, and you had this great cast of lawyers, including Lincoln's Secretary of War, Stanton, and Reverdy E. Johnson, who was the winning lawyer in the Dred Scott case, and Mary Surratt's losing defense lawyer. The marvelous thing. And they said, temporary insanity. The first time in American jurisprudence when the notion of, he was so enraged when he saw his wife's lover that he went insane and shot him 5 times. Now, was your final question, what would I have done? Well, if I was as smart as those guys, I would have gone down the temporary insanity route, because that won. Sickles later went on to become U.S. ambassador to Spain, and rumor has it he had an affair with the Queen of Spain. Quite a guy, Congressman Dan Sickles of New York. You had one.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, was there any serious consideration that the trial of the conspirators that assassinated Lincoln should be in a civil court, or how did it become a military tribunal?
We're going to have a quick run through, and then I'll get you a picture that I happened on before. Oh, Mary Surratt. The courtroom where all the co-conspirators were tried. Reverdy E. Johnson, whom I just mentioned, Mary's lawyer, and that, of course, is the hanging. This is right near the Officers Club at Fort McNair right now. They were tried by military commission, as you say. Was there any serious effort to have them tried by a civilian tribunal? And the answer is no. Secretary of War Stanton, you'll recall that the Secretary of State was severely injured in the broader conspiracy. President Johnson, a lot of people thought he was a drunk, and let's not get him involved in anything. So Secretary of War Stanton took charge, and he wanted the conspirators, whoever they were, hanged before Lincoln was buried. And how's the fastest way to do that, most efficient way to do that? That's what I want, military tribunal. They asked the Attorney General, his name was Speed, who was the brother of Lincoln's best friend back in Springfield. They shared an apartment together and a bed together. People go, ooh, but that's the way people acted then. And Speed gave a one-sentence Attorney General opinion. Yes, a military commission is appropriate. Indeed, it ought to happen. Now, he didn't write his full written opinion until a month after they were hanged. At the trial, oh, gone the wrong way, sorry. Oh, I wish I was competent. Oh. Reverdy Johnson, who was, as I said, won the Dred Scott case, a confidant of Lincoln, a Lincoln pallbearer, twice a U.S. Senator from Maryland, United States Attorney General. He gave an absolutely brilliant argument to the commission, saying, you have no business trying these people. He was dealing with Mary Surratt. He said, our system is such that a person has a right to an independent judge. You guys are military officers. You're not independent. With a jury, there's no jury here. In a public trial, the first 4 days of the trial were held in secret. And why are you doing this? Jefferson Davis has been indicted in a civilian court for treason. The Constitution says treason is a civilian crime. These people are not members of the military. This is travesty. Good argument, fell on deaf ears. The Secretary of War was the boss of the generals and the colonels who were the judge and jury. It was the dark side of the law. Okay, Don, is that it? Yeah. But I'll be happy to chat with you guys after this, because Don Orlando is going to throw something at me. And if anyone wants to get a book, I'll be happy to sign it outside. Thank you so much for your attention.